The clock in the hall struck 12, and Elias Whitmore vanished from his crib, leaving only a faint cry echoing in the nursery like a ghost's unfinished plea. I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart pounding against my ribs as if it meant to break free. The room was dim, lit only by the moon slanting through the lace curtains, casting shadows that twisted like accusing fingers across the wooden floor. Little Elias, my brother's firstborn, just 3 months old, had been fussing moments before, his tiny fists waving in the air. Now the crib stood empty, the blanket undisturbed, as if he'd dissolved into the night itself. I rushed forward, my boots thudding heavily on the planks, and peered over the edge. Nothing. No sign of him. Not even a dropped toy or a rumpled sheet. "Pa!" I shouted, my voice cracking despite my 18 years. The house was old, built by Grandfather Whitmore back when Georgia was still wild frontier, its walls groaning under the weight of secrets. I bolted down the hall, past portraits of stern-faced ancestors staring down with eyes that seemed to know too much. Father was in his study poring over ledgers by candlelight, his brow furrowed as always. He looked up sharply, his pipe pausing mid-draw. "What is it, Caleb?" His voice was gruff, laced with the exhaustion of a man who'd buried too many hopes. "Elias, he's gone, just gone. At midnight like the others." Father's face drained of color, the pipe clattering to the desk. He shoved back his chair and was on his feet in an instant, barreling past me toward the nursery. I followed close, my mind racing through the family curse that had haunted us for generations. Every firstborn son, gone at the stroke of 12 on some unmarked night. My Uncle Harlan disappeared at 16 during a harvest moon, Grandfather's brother swallowed by the darkness at birth, and now Elias, the latest in the line, stolen without a trace. We searched the room together, Father lifting the crib with hands that trembled for the first time I'd ever seen. "Check the windows," he barked, though we both knew they were latched tight. I did anyway, my fingers fumbling with the iron hooks, the cool night air seeping through cracks like a whisper of warning. Outside, the pecan trees swayed in the breeze, their leaves rustling secrets to the stars. No footprints in the dew-kissed grass below, no ladder or rope, just emptiness. By dawn, the whole plantation was astir. Mother wept quietly in the kitchen, her apron twisted in her fists, while Aunt Lydia, Father's spinster sister, sharp-tongued and unyielding, paced the veranda, muttering about witches and old debts. She was the only one who'd ever spoken openly of the dynasty's shadow, claiming it started with great-great-grandfather Elias I, who'd made a pact in these very woods during the war with the Creek. Foolish men and their bargains, she'd say, her eyes darting to the tree line as if expecting retribution. Father called for the sheriff from town, a burly man named Harlan, coincidentally after my lost uncle, who arrived with a deputy and a skeptical squint. They poked around the nursery, lifting rugs and tapping walls for hidden panels, but found nothing. "Babies don't just up and walk off, Mr. Whitmore," the sheriff drawled, chewing on a toothpick. "Could be wild animals, or maybe the wet nurse slipped away with him for ransom." The wet nurse, poor Eliza, a freedwoman we'd hired after Mother's milk dried up, was dragged in for questioning. She stood tall in the parlor, her dark eyes flashing defiance. "I ain't taking no child, massa. I love that boy like my own." Was rocking him to sleep when the clock chimed, then poof, like smoke. Father rubbed his temples, the lines on his face deepening. I watched from the corner, my thoughts churning. Eliza had been with us only a month, but she'd been kind, humming spirituals that made Elias coo. If not her, then what? The family legend spoke of a midnight rider, a spectral figure on horseback who claimed the firstborns as tribute. But that was storyteller's fancy, meant to scare children like me around the fire. Yet here we were, the crib empty, the air thick with unspoken fear. As the sheriff left empty-handed, promising to post notices in Atlanta, I slipped out to the stables. My horse, Old Bess, nickered softly as I saddled her, the leather creaking under my hands. I couldn't just sit idle. The weight of it all pressed on me like the Georgia heat. Father had pinned his hopes on Elias carrying on the Whitmore name, expanding the cotton fields, marrying into wealth. Now that dream was ash, and me, the second son, always overlooked, suddenly the only heir left standing. I rode into the woods bordering our land, the path overgrown with vines that snagged at my sleeves like grasping hands. The air grew cooler here, heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. Midway to the old creek, I spotted something glinting in the underbrush. A silver rattle, Elias's favorite, dropped as if in haste. My pulse quickened. No animal would leave that behind. I dismounted, kneeling to pick it up, the metal warm against my palm despite the morning chill. That's when I heard it. A distant whinny, not from any horse I knew, followed by the snap of twigs under deliberate steps. I froze, hand on my pistol, eyes scanning the trees. A figure emerged from the mist. A man, tall and cloaked, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. He didn't speak. The lantern's flame flickered as I pried open the attic trunk, dust motes swirling like ghosts in the stale air. My fingers trembled on the rusted latch, but I forced it wide, revealing stacks of yellowed journals bound in cracked leather. Father's handwriting stared back at me, sharp, unyielding strokes that matched the man who'd raised me with an iron fist and a whispered fear. Elias, it began on the top page, dated 1832, the year before my brother vanished. If you're reading this, the curse has claimed another. I slammed the journal shut, heart pounding against my ribs. The house creaked around me, the old Georgia plantation settling into the humid night like it was alive and listening. Midnight was hours away, but the weight of it pressed on my chest already. 25 years old, the firstborn son, and tonight marked the anniversary of Uncle Josiah's disappearance, just like the others before him. Father had locked himself in his study after supper, muttering about debts and the war brewing out west, but I knew better. He was waiting for the clock to strike, same as me. Downstairs, the floorboards groaned under Aunt Lydia's footsteps. She was the only one who'd stayed after Mother's death, her sharp tongue and watchful eyes the family's anchor. "Elias Whitmore, you up there stirring ghosts again?" Her voice cut through the silence, laced with that cautious edge she'd honed over decades of loss. I shoved the journals back into the trunk and descended the ladder, wiping sweat from my brow. The attic stairs led to the narrow hallway where she waited, arms crossed over her faded calico dress, gray hair pinned tight, her eyes the color of storm clouds fixed on me. "You look like you've seen one of them boys come back. Sit. Tea's still hot." We moved to the kitchen, where the fire in the hearth cast long shadows across the scarred oak table. She poured from the pot, steam rising in lazy curls, and slid a cup my way. I wrapped my hands around it, the warmth grounding me. "Found Father's old writings," I said, voice low. He knew about the pattern. "Every firstborn gone at midnight on their 25th birthday. Josiah, then Thomas, now—" "Don't say it." She cut me off, her spoon clinking sharply against her cup. Brave as she was, caution always won out. It was how she'd survived the yellow fever that took half the county. Talking it don't make it less real. Your pa tried reasoning it away once, blamed moonshine or river fevers. But we both know it's more. That old oak out back, the one struck by lightning the year the first boy went, folks say it's cursed, rooted in some Choctaw tale from before the land was ours. I leaned forward, the chair scraping the floor. Then we face it. No more waiting like sheep for slaughter. I've got the pistol from the hunt and the horse saddled. If something comes at midnight, we ride for the preacher in town or the sheriff. Can't be ghosts if lead stops him. Lydia's laugh was bitter, short. Witty as ever, boy, but grit won't outrun what's in the blood. Remember Thomas? We searched the fields till dawn, found nothing but his boot by the river heel melted like wax. She paused, stirring her tea slower now, eyes distant. Your pa made me promise to keep you from running off. Said the dynasty ends with sense, not folly. The clock in the hall chimed 10, each toll a hammer blow. I stood, pushing the chair back with a resolve that felt thin as parchment. Sense got us this far, hiding behind shutters while sons vanish. I'm not father. Tonight we watch the oak, together. She rose too, slower, her hand gripping the table edge for support. The air thickened, humid and heavy with unspoken dread, as thunder rumbled distant over the pines. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters like impatient fingers. I grabbed the lantern and the pistol from its hook by the door, its weight cold and reassuring in my palm. Lydia followed, fetching her shawl and a silver locket. Thomas's, she never said it outright, but I knew. We stepped onto the porch, the night swallowing us whole. The oak loomed at the yard's edge, its twisted branches clawing the sky, bark blackened from that long-ago strike. No moon pierced the clouds, just the faint glow of fireflies winking like false hopes. I scanned the shadows, every rustle of leaves setting my nerves alight. Stay close, I whispered, cocking the hammer. Minutes stretched, the clock's echoes fading into the chorus of crickets. Then a snap, twig underfoot from the underbrush beyond the tree. Lydia's breath hitched beside me, her hand brushing my arm. I raised the lantern higher, light spilling over the roots. Nothing. But the air turned colder, unnatural for July. carrying a whisper like silk on stone. It started as a hum, low and vibrating through the ground. The oak's leaves shivered, though the wind had stilled. My pulse thundered in my ears. "There!" Lydia hissed, pointing. A shape detached from the trunk, tall humanoid, edges blurring like smoke. Not a man, not a beast, but something that mimicked the night itself. I fired. The shot cracked the silence, muzzle flash blinding me for a heartbeat. The figure recoiled, dissolving into mist that reeked of damp earth and decay. But as the echo died, a laugh echoed from the darkness, not mocking but hungry. The clock struck 11. 1 hour left. We backed toward the house, my arm around Lydia's shoulders, her step steady. The lantern's flame guttered in the humid night air as I slipped through the overgrown path behind the Whitmore manor. My boots sinking into the soft earth with every cautious step. Elias had sworn the old well was the key. Something about echoes carrying secrets from the family's shadowed past. But now, with the moon high and mocking, I wondered if he'd led me into madness. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest, each beat reminding me that midnight was creeping closer, and young Thomas, the latest firstborn, was counting on me to break this infernal cycle. I paused at the well's edge, the stone rim slick with moss and dew. Peering down, I saw only darkness, a void that swallowed the lantern's light whole. "Elias, you better be right about this," I muttered to myself, though he was back at the house watching over Thomas with that nervous twitch in his jaw. Elias, ever the loyal groundskeeper, with his weathered hands and unyielding faith in family lore. He'd sketched the well on a scrap of paper that afternoon, insisting the disappearances started here with old Josiah Whitmore in 1792, when the first son vanished without a trace. Tying the lantern to the rope I'd brought, I lowered it slowly, the creak of the pulley echoing unnaturally loud. The light bobbed down, illuminating jagged walls veined with roots until it steadied at the bottom, 20 feet, maybe more. A faint glint caught my eye, metal half buried in silt. My pulse quickened. Could it be a locket like the one Elias described from his grandfather's tales? I secured the rope around a nearby oak and began my descent, the well's chill seeping through my shirt like fingers from the grave. Halfway down, the air grew thick, tasting of iron and forgotten rain. I gripped the rope tighter, my mind racing back to the manor's library that morning. Thomas, barely 16, had pulled me aside after the others left, his eyes wide with that boyish defiance masking pure terror. "Uncle Harlan, it's tonight, isn't it? The clock strikes 12 and I'm gone like the rest." I'd nodded, hating the weight of it, my own firstborn days long past, but the curse's shadow ever present. As the family's reluctant historian, cautious by nature yet driven by a stubborn grit, I'd promised him answers, even if it meant facing the dark alone. My boots hit the water with a splash, cold shocking up my legs. Wading forward, I fished the glint from the muck. A tarnished pocket watch, its face cracked but the hands frozen at midnight. Engraved on the back, J.W. 1792, Josiah. A chill unrelated to the water prickled my skin. This wasn't just relic. It was proof the stories weren't fever dreams. But as I turned to climb, a low rumble started from above, like thunder, but inside the earth. The rope jerked in my hands. I yanked hard, hauling myself up inch by inch, the watch clutched in my teeth. The rumble grew, vibrating through the stones, and then crack. The oak groaned, roots tearing free. The rope went slack and I plummeted back, water closing over me like a coffin lid. Panic surged as I thrashed, lungs burning, the watch slipping from my grasp to sink into the abyss. Surfacing, I gasped, but the well's mouth was a distant circle now, the lantern extinguished. "Elias!" I shouted, voice raw but only echoes answered. Treading water, I scanned the walls for handholds, fingers scraping at slick stone. The family portraits flashed in my mind. Generation after generation, firstborns staring out with hollow eyes, their absences etched into the dynasty's bones. Thomas's face overlaid them all, trusting, vulnerable. I couldn't fail him. Not like father failed me, vanishing when I was 10, leaving whispers of scandal and spectral debts. A faint scrape from above, someone descending. Hope flared, but then a shadow blocked the light and a voice called down, smooth as polished oak but laced with menace. "Harlan Whitmore, you've stirred what should have stayed buried. Not Elias." The words hung, heavy as the water weighing me down, and I realized the challenge wasn't just the curse, it was whoever had guarded it all these years. Midnight tolled distantly from the manor bell, and the water began to rise, slow but relentless. The lantern's flame flickered as I pried open the attic trunk, the wood splintering under my knife like brittle bone. Dust choked the air and I coughed, waving it away, my heart pounding from the climb up those groaning stairs. Pa's old journals, leather-bound relics from before the war with Mexico, spilled out, their pages yellowed and curled at the edges. I'd come here alone after midnight because trusting Harlan after what he'd said last night felt like handing the noose to the hangman. My brother Tom's ghost still haunted me, vanished on his 21st birthday just like the others, and Harlan's sly grin when he mentioned family secrets had sealed it. No more waiting for daylight excuses. I flipped through the first volume, the script cramped and fading, Pa's hand steady even in frenzy. Entries about cotton yields and slave auctions blurred past until I hit the one dated 1832, the year my Uncle Josiah disappeared. The boy cried out at the stroke of 12, Pa wrote, but the shadows took him. I followed the trail to the old chapel ruins where the air turned cold as grave dirt. Something whispered his name from the walls, Elias, Elias, but it wasn't him. My name, not Josiah's. A chill snaked down my spine and I slammed the book shut, glancing at the attic door. The house was silent, but silence in Whitmore Hall had always lied. Pushing on, I dug deeper into the trunk, my fingers brushing something metallic, a small brass key etched with a crescent moon. It fit the lock on a hidden compartment at the trunk's base, clicking open with a sound like a trap springing. Inside lay a bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon, addressed to the keeper of the bloodline. The top one was from Grandfather Whitmore, postmarked Savannah, 1810. The pact holds, it read. The firstborn must pay the toll at midnight or the land withers. I sent Elias before you. Now it's your turn to guard the secret. The buyers in the city demand purity, no traces left. Buyers? My mind reeled. Not a curse, but a bargain? With who? Planters? Outlaws? The words swam and I reread them. The lantern casting long shadows that danced like accusing fingers. Footsteps creaked below, soft, deliberate. I froze, snuffing the light with a quick breath, plunging the attic into black. Harlan's voice drifted up, muffled through the floorboards. Elias, you up there, boy? Ma's worried after your little outburst at supper. Outburst? I'd barely spoken, too busy watching him eye Tom's empty chair like it was a throne waiting. I eased toward the ladder, key clutched in my fist, letters stuffed into my shirt. If this was some scheme to sell off the heirs, God forbid to cover debts or worse, I'd end it tonight. But as I descended, the house seemed to hold its breath, the walls whispering that midnight toll again. Closer now than I knew, Harlan waited at the bottom, his face pale in the hall's single candle, eyes sharp as a fox's. Couldn't sleep? He asked, casual, but his hand rested on the banister like he might grab it or me. I met his gaze, the key burning against my chest. Found something of Pa's, I said, voice steady despite the thunder in my ribs. About the disappearances. Buyers, Harlan. What the hell does that mean? His smile faltered, just a twitch, and he stepped closer, the air thickening between us. Family business, brother. Some debts run deeper than blood. I backed away, hand slipping toward the pistol in my belt. The clock in the parlor struck 11, 1 hour left. If he lunged, I'd shoot, curse or no curse. But deep down I knew, the real shadow wasn't him. It was whatever waited at midnight, hungry for the next firstborn. The lantern's flame flickered as I slammed the attic door behind me, my heart pounding like a war drum in the stifling Georgia heat. Dust motes danced in the dim light, settling on the yellowed journals stacked like forgotten tombstones on the warped oak shelves. Elias's voice echoed in my mind, his warning from the parlor gravelly and urgent. Don't go poking where the devil's buried, boy. The Whitmores pay at midnight, always have. But I was Elias Whitmore's firstborn, 23 and fool enough to think bloodline meant I could break the chain. The clock downstairs struck 11, each chime a nail in my resolve. I grabbed the nearest journal. Its leather cover cracked like parched earth and flipped it open to a page marked with a raven's feather. Pa's handwriting stared back at me, jagged and hurried, dated 1829. The boy vanished as the bell tolled. No scream, no shadow, just gone like smoke through a sieve. Mama swears it's the old pact, the one Grandpappy made with that traveling preacher under the blood moon. I ain't believin' in curses, but the land's gone sour since. Cotton wilts before it blooms, and the river whispers at night. I traced the ink with my thumb, feeling the weight of generations pressing down. My brother Thomas had been the last, taken 3 years back when I was too young to fight it. Now it was my turn, or so the family legend went. But legends were for fools. I needed proof, something to shatter the midnight grip. A floorboard creaked below, sharp as a rifle crack. I froze, snuffing the lantern with a quick breath. Moonlight sliced through the attic slats, painting silver bars across the journals. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, climbed the stairs. Not Elias. His limp made him shuffle. This was lighter, stealthier. Cousin Lila? She'd been hovering all evening, her eyes darting like a fox in the henhouse, muttering about protecting the blood. I wedged myself behind a trunk, the splintered wood digging into my back, and gripped the journal like a shield. The door handle rattled, then eased open with a groan. Lila slipped in, her silhouette narrow and tense, a shawl clutched around her shoulders despite the summer swelter. She didn't light a lamp, just moved to the shelves with the grace of someone who'd done this before. Her fingers skimmed the spines, pausing on one bound in red-dyed hide. The family Bible, or what passed for it in our haunted line. "Elias thinks he can hide you forever," she whispered to the shadows, her voice a thread of silk over steel. "But the pact demands its due." My breath caught. Pact? Not just superstition, then. She pulled the red book free and tucked it under her arm, glancing over her shoulder as if sensing eyes on her. I shifted, a loose nail scraping the floor. She whirled, eyes wide in the moonlight. "Who's there?" Her hand dipped into her pocket, emerging with a small derringer, the barrel glinting cold. I stayed still, pulse thundering, but the trunk's shadow betrayed me, a sliver of my boot visible. Lila stepped closer, gun raised. "Show yourself, or I'll shoot first and ask the ghosts later. No choice now." I rose slowly, hands empty, the journal still clutched in one fist. "It's me, Lila, Caleb. What in God's name are you doing up here at this hour?" Her face twisted, relief warring with fury as she lowered the pistol a fraction. "Caleb? Fool boy, you should have run when Elias told you. Midnight's coming and it don't wait for questions." She glanced at the journal in my hand, then at the red book under her arm. "That what you came for? Puz scribbles? They won't save you." I took a step forward, keeping my voice steady despite the knot in my gut. "Save me from what? You talk like you know more than the rest of us. What's this pact? And why are you stealing the Bible like a thief in the night?" Lila's laugh was bitter, short as a snapped twig. "Stealing? I'm saving what's left." The preacher, back in '98 when the dynasty was just dirt and ambition, Grandpappy struck a deal for prosperity. Land that bore gold and cotton, rivals that fell like wheat. But the price? Every firstborn son, claimed at midnight on his 21st birthday. Thomas, your uncle before him, all of them. "I ain't losing another." She thrust the red book toward me, pages fluttering open to a yellowed contract, signatures in faded ink, Josiah Whitmore, and a scrawl that looked like Elias Blackwood, prophet of the Vale. "See? It's real. And tonight it's you or the whole damn line crumbles." The clock downstairs told 11:30, vibrations humming through the floorboards. My mouth went dry. Then why hide it? Elias acts like it's just bad luck, keeps us chained to the plantation like it's holy ground. Lila's eyes softened, just for a beat, because breaking it means facing worse. The preacher's kin still watch, shadows in the pines, whispers in the wind. But I've found a way, a loophole in the words. Blood for blood, but not ours. She grabbed my arm, her grip iron. "Come with me. To the river." Before the bell rings. I hesitated, the journal heavy in my hand. Trust her? Lila had always been the sharp one, the widow who ran the kitchens like a general, but her secrets ran deep as the lantern's flame guttered in the humid night air, casting jagged shadows across the Whitmore parlor as I pried open the warped drawer of Grandfather Elias's desk. My fingers, slick with sweat, brushed against something cold and metallic, a locket half buried under yellowed ledgers. I shouldn't be here, rifling through the dead man's secrets like a thief in my own home. But the whispers from the fields had driven me to it. The sharecroppers swore they'd seen lights flickering in the old chapel ruins at midnight, the same hour every firstborn had vanished before me. I snapped the locket open, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. Inside, a miniature portrait of my father stared back, his eyes hollowed by whatever fever had claimed him young. No, not fever. The family lore said midnight, always midnight, but no one dared speak it plain. The portrait's reverse held an inscription etched in a hand I didn't recognize. "The debt binds the blood. Break it or join them." My breath caught. Debt to what? The Whitmores had built this plantation on cotton and cunning, but rumors lingered of darker bargains. Pacts made in the shadow of the war that never quite reached George's heart. Footsteps creaked on the stairs, soft, deliberate. I slammed the locket shut and shoved it into my pocket, spinning toward the door just as Aunt Lydia appeared, her silhouette framed by the hallway's oil lamp. She was the cautious one, always mending hems and murmuring prayers, but tonight her eyes held a sharpness that made my skin prickle. "Elias," she said, using my given name like a warning. "Midnight's come and gone. You're still here. Praise be." I forced a nod, but my mind raced. She'd been the one to find Uncle Thomas's empty bed 20 years back, the sheets cold as river stones. "Couldn't sleep," I lied, stepping away from the desk. "The heat's a devil." She didn't buy it. Her gaze flicked to the drawer, still ajar, but she said nothing. Just crossed her arms over her nightgown, the lace frayed from too many washings. We stood there in the heavy silence, the house groaning like it held its breath. Outside, the cicadas screamed, a relentless chorus that drowned out the distant rumble of thunder. Lydia finally spoke, her voice low. "Your father's locket. You found it, didn't you?" I froze, hand instinctively covering my pocket. How could she know? She stepped closer, the scent of lavender and liniment clinging to her. "It won't save you, boy. None of it did for the others. But if you're fool enough to chase ghosts, take me with you. I've buried too many Whitmores to watch another fade into nothing." Her words hung between us, earnest and edged with fear. I wanted to argue, to tell her I was done with curses and midnight tales, that I'd sell this cursed land and start fresh in Atlanta. But the locket burned against my thigh and the chapel lights called from the dark. "Tomorrow," I muttered. "We go at dawn. Before it pulls me under, too." She nodded, turning away, but not before I saw the tremor in her hands. The debt, whatever it was, wasn't just mine anymore. It was ours, and midnight waited like a noose tightening slow. The lantern's flame guttered as I shoved open the attic door, the hinges screaming like a banshee in the dead of night. Dust motes swirled in the sudden draft, and there, sprawled across the warped floorboards, lay Uncle Harlan, my father's brother, the last Whitmore, firstborn before the war took him south. His eyes stared blank at the rafters, but it wasn't death that chilled me. It was the watch clutched in his stiff fingers, frozen at the stroke of 12. I dropped to my knees beside him, my breath ragged in the stale air. Harlan had come back from the fields that evening, muttering about shadows in the cotton rows, insisting he'd seen Father's ghost pacing the old oak. I'd dismissed it as fever from the heat, but now, this. His coat was torn at the cuffs, smeared with red clay that didn't match our Georgia soil. Darker, almost black, like the earth from the family plot we'd sealed shut years ago. I pried the watch free, its brass warm against my palm, and flipped it open. Midnight, exact as the tolling bell in town. Every firstborn son gone at that hour. Father in 42, cousin Elias in 48, and now Harlan, who wasn't even blood-born to the line but raised as one after his own kin scattered. "Thomas?" Eliza's voice cut through from the stairs, sharp with that cautious edge she wielded like a switchblade. My sister appeared in the doorway, her lantern held high, casting long shadows that danced like accusing fingers. She was brave in her way, had ridden alone to the sheriff last spring when the raid started, but tonight her face was pale, freckles stark against the flush of fear. "What in God's name?" "He's gone," I said, voice cracking as I stood pocketing the watch. No time for tears. The house creaked below us as if the walls themselves mourned, just like the others. "Midnight, Eliza, look." She knelt, touching his cheek with trembling fingers, then recoiled. "This ain't natural. Harlan was fit as a mule yesterday, and that dirt. It's from the ridge, ain't it? The cursed ridge where Father vanished." Her eyes met mine, fierce now, the wit sparking through her worry. "We can't bury this secret anymore, Thomas. The dynasty ends with us if we don't face it." I nodded, helping her to her feet. The attic felt smaller, the air thicker as if the disappearances were closing in like a noose. Downstairs the clock struck 1, mocking us with its normalcy. But I knew better. The challenge wasn't ghosts or fever dreams. It was the ridge itself, that forsaken strip of land we'd sworn off since grandfather's time. Rivals from the neighboring plantation had been eyeing our acres, whispering of debts and seizures, but this felt deeper, tied to the blood we'd spilled in the fields long before the war drums beat. We dragged Harlan's body down the narrow stairs, each step a jolt through my arms, his weight a reminder of the cost. In the parlor, we laid him on the settee, covering him with the quilt Mother had sewn. Eliza lit the hearth, though summer heat pressed against the windows like an unwelcome guest. "We go at dawn," I said, wiping sweat from my brow. "To the ridge. Burn whatever's calling them or dig it up, whatever it takes." She argued, as I knew she would, her voice a whip of reason. Dawn's foolhardy brother. The sheriff's men patrol the roads now, with the tensions rising. And if it's the McAllisters behind this, poison or worse, we'll need proof, not rashness. But I saw the flicker in her eyes, the same grit that had kept us fed through lean winters. Proof dies with us if we wait, I countered, grabbing my father's old revolver from the mantel. It was loaded, heavy with promise. Harlan's watch, it's ticking again, listen. We both froze as the faint, relentless click filled the room. Midnight had passed, but the curse wasn't done. Outside, thunder rumbled, unnatural for the dry spell, and I wondered if the ridge was stirring, hungry for its next claim. By first light, we were mounted on the bay mare and the old gray. Saddlebags stuffed with lanterns, rope, and father's journal, the one he'd scribbled in before vanishing, full of ravings about the vein beneath the roots. The road to the ridge wound through our cotton fields, the bowls heavy and white under the rising sun, but I felt eyes on us, from the workers pausing in their rows, or the distant McAllister fences. Eliza rode close, her rifle slung across her back, silent now but for the creak of leather. The ridge loomed ahead, a jagged scar of red earth and twisted pines where the soil turned sour and nothing grew right. We'd lost men to falls there. Excuses for the disappearances we'd buried with them. As we crested the first rise, the wind picked up, carrying a metallic tang, like blood mixed with iron. I reined in, scanning the underbrush. There, Eliza whispered, pointing to a fresh scar in the ground, dirt overturned as if by claws. Dismounting, I tied the horses and approached, revolver drawn. The hole was shallow, but inside gleamed something metallic, a locket half buried, engraved with the Whitmore crest. Father's lost years ago. My heart pounded as I reached for it, but Eliza grabbed my arm. Wait, look at the tracks. Human prints, but elongated, leading deeper into the thicket. Not rivals, not animals. Something else pulling our men at midnight's call. We followed. The journal's words echoing in I gripped the lantern tighter, its flame flickering like a heartbeat against the damp walls of the old root cellar. Elias had insisted we hide here after the scream echoed from the big house. Another midnight, another firstborn gone. This time young Tommy Whitmore, barely 16. My hands shook as I set the light down on a crate, the shadows dancing over jars of preserves and forgotten tools. We can't keep running, I whispered to myself, though Elias was just feet away, his breath ragged in the dark. He shifted on the dirt floor, his wiry frame coiled like a spring. Elias, always the quick one with words, but tonight his voice cracked. Running's all we've got, Caleb. You saw what happened to your brother last year. And now Tommy. It's the curse, plain as day. Every firstborn, snatched at the stroke of 12. I wanted to argue, to say it was fever or some fevered dream from the family's moonshine, but the facts clawed at me. Father gone in 42, Uncle Josiah in 49, and now this. The dynasty crumbling one heir at a time. I paced the narrow space, boots scuffing against the earth. The air smelled of mold and sweet decay, a reminder of the plantation's underbelly. The slaves' whispers I'd overheard about spirits walking the fields at night. But Elias was no believer in ghosts. He was the practical sort, a tinkerer who'd fixed the cotton gin with scraps from the river. We go back up at dawn, he said, pulling a flask from his coat. Search the grounds again. There has to be a pattern. Footprints, a hidden door, something human. I nodded, though doubt gnawed deeper. Last time we'd searched after my brother vanished, we'd found only his pocket watch stopped at midnight, tangled in the azaleas by the family crypt. The image burned, silver face cracked, hands frozen. What if it wasn't a curse but a man? Some rival from the neighboring farms jealous of the Whitmore land stretching to the Chattahoochee, or worse, one of us driven mad by inheritance fever. A low rumble shook the cellar door. Thunder or something heavier? Elias froze, flask halfway to his lips. I snatched the lantern, heart pounding as I crept to the ladder. Stay put, I hissed. But he was already on his feet, grabbing the shovel we'd brought as a weapon. We ascended slowly, the night air hitting us like a slap, cool and thick with the scent of rain-soaked pines. Outside, the moon hung low, silvering the tobacco fields. No sign of intruders, but the big house loomed silent, its windows black as judgment. Then I saw it. A flicker in the tree line, not lightning, but a lantern of its own bobbing toward the river path. Elias gripped my arm. That's Jedediah's light, the overseer. What's he doing out here after... We didn't wait for answers. Slipping through the underbrush, thorns snagging our trousers, we tailed the glow. My mind raced. Jedediah with his scarred hands and grudge against father for the war debts. If he was involved, the path narrowed, roots twisting like veins underfoot. The other lantern stopped at the riverbank where the water churned black under the current. Jedediah knelt, digging at the mud with a spade. Elias cursed under his breath, but I held him back, straining to see. He unearthed a burlap sack, small and sodden, and from it pulled a doll. No, a crude effigy stitched with what looked like hair, a tiny Whitmore crest pinned to its chest. My stomach twisted. Voodoo, or just a madman's taunt? Before we could move, Jedediah turned, eyes catching the moonlight. "Who's there?" His voice boomed, spade raised like a club. Elias lunged forward, but I yanked him into the bushes. We held our breath as footsteps crunched closer, the river's murmur mocking our hiding. This wasn't ending tonight, not without proof. But as Jedediah's lantern swept past, inches from our faces, I knew we'd stirred something that wouldn't stay buried. The dynasty's shadow had grown longer, and we were running out of suns to lose. The lantern's flame flickered as I slammed the attic door behind me, my boots thudding against the warped floorboards. Sweat stung my eyes, but I couldn't stop to wipe it. Elias's labored breaths echoed from the shadows, each one a ragged plea. He'd seen it again, the thing that took our brother at midnight, and now it was coming for him. I gripped the iron poker tighter, its weight a cold comfort in my palm as I scanned the rafters where dust motes danced like lost souls. "Eli, talk to me," I whispered, kneeling beside him. He was curled against a trunk of forgotten ledgers, his face pale as the moonlight slicing through the cracked window. The clock downstairs struck 11, each chime a hammer blow to my resolve. Our father had sworn it was fever dreams, but I'd buried too many firstborns to believe that lie. Elias clutched my sleeve, his fingers trembling. "It's not a ghost, Tom. It's hungry eyes like coals in the dark." I nodded, though doubt clawed at my gut. The Whitmore curse had claimed grandfather's heir, then father's, and now mine. Elias, the latest in line, marked from birth with that damned birthmark like a brand. We'd tried everything. The preacher's prayers, the doc's tonics, even burying talismans under the big oak. Nothing stuck. But tonight I'd found the journal in father's study, hidden behind loose paneling. Scribbled warnings about a pact made in blood, back when the land was wild and the family clawed it from the swamp. A scrape sounded from the eaves like claws on tin. My heart lurched. "Stay down," I hissed, rising to bar the door with an old chest. Elias coughed, a wet, desperate sound, and I cursed the malaria that had weakened him just when we needed strength. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and something metallic. Blood? I pressed my ear to the wood, listening for footsteps on the stairs. None. But the scratching grew insistent, circling like a predator scenting weakness. I turned back to Elias, pulling a flask from my pocket, whiskey laced with willow bark, the only thing that eased his chills. "Drink this. We ain't dying tonight." He took a swig, grimacing, then met my eyes with that stubborn fire I'd always envied. "You believe the journal? That it's tied to the gold mine Pa dug up?" I hesitated. Father had never spoken of it, but the dates matched. The first disappearance after the vein struck pay dirt. The family fortune built on veins of yellow that shouldn't have been there, deep in Georgia clay. Before I could answer, the window shattered inward. Glass rained like brittle stars, and a shape lunged through, tall, hunched, its form twisting unnaturally in the lamplight. Not human, not animal. A silhouette of sinew and shadow. Eyes glowing like embers in a forge. Elias screamed, scrambling back, but I swung the poker with all the rage of 10 lost years. It connected with a sickening thud, the impact jarring my arms, and the thing recoiled, hissing, a sound like steam escaping a boiler. "Run!" I yelled, but Elias was already moving, grabbing a shard of glass as a makeshift knife. We bolted for the stairs. The creatures pursued a whirlwind of snarls behind us. The house groaned as if alive, floorboards buckling under invisible weight. I shoved Elias ahead, my mind racing through the journal's clues, salt lines, iron wards, a confession to break the chain. But midnight was minutes away, and the blood pact demanded its due. We burst into the parlor where the grandfather clock loomed like a sentinel. 11:50. The front door hung ajar. Had I left it? No time to question. Elias barred it with the settee, his breaths coming in gasps. "Tom, the mine. It's the key." Pa's map in the study. I nodded, snatching the poker again as the scratching resumed, now from the walls themselves. The air pulsed with malice, the temperature dropping sharp as a winter gale. I glanced at Elias, his eyes fierce despite the pallor. We end this together. No more firstborns vanishing into the night. He grinned weakly, clutching the glass shard. Damn right. For the dynasty. The clock began to chime 12, each toll vibrating through my bones. The door rattled, wood splintering, and I braced for the fight, knowing one wrong move meant we'd join the ghosts of Whitmore's past. But in that moment, with my brother's back to mine, I felt the grit rise, the unyielding human spark that no curse could snuff. The lantern's flame guttered as I shoved open the attic door, the hinges screaming like a banshee in the dead of night. Dust motes swirled in the beam, thick as Georgia humidity, and there, sprawled across the warped floorboards, lay Elias Whitmore, my cousin, the latest firstborn to vanish, or so we'd thought. But he wasn't gone. He was here, pale as moonlight, his chest rising in shallow breaths. A silver locket clutched in his fist like it was the only thing tethering him to the world. I dropped to my knees beside him, my heart pounding against my ribs. Elias? God almighty, boy, wake up. My voice cracked, echoing off the rafters, cluttered with forgotten trunks and cobweb-draped heirlooms. He'd been missing since midnight 3 days ago, just like the others. Disappeared without a trace, leaving the family reeling in whispers of curses and midnight phantoms. But this was flesh and blood, not some ghost story spun by old Aunt Clara. His eyelids fluttered and he gasped, eyes wild with whatever hell he'd clawed back from. Jeremiah, don't. The clock. The words tumbled out hoarse, barely audible over the distant toll of the grandfather clock downstairs, its chimes mocking us even now. I gripped his shoulder, feeling the tremor in his bones. What clock? Talk to me, Elias. What happened to you? We'd searched the plantation high and low, me and Doc Harlan leading the charge while Father paced the parlor, denying the family's dark legacy. Every firstborn son gone at the stroke of 12 for 5 generations. Pa had vanished that way before I was born, leaving me to inherit the whispers instead. But Elias was the current heir, and his absence had cracked the dynasty wide open. He coughed, a wet rattle that turned my stomach. The locket. It pulls you. Into the shadow. I saw them all, Pa grandfather trapped in the dark, building something endless, his fingers uncurled, revealing the locket's engraved surface. A twisted oak tree, roots delving into what looked like a pit. I'd seen it before, passed down like a poisoned chalice, but never opened. Not until tonight, when desperation drove me up here. Downstairs, boots thudded on the stairs. Doc Harlan, no doubt, his cautious drawl already barking orders. Jeremiah, you find anything up there? The man was a rock, steady as the river that bordered our lands, but even he couldn't explain the impossible. We'd planned to burn the attic relics at dawn, end the curse with fire, but Elias's return shattered that. If he could come back, maybe the others could too. Elias's hand clamped my wrist, his grip surprisingly iron. It's not a curse, Jer, it's a machine. Under the roots. They dig night after night, pulled by the bell. His eyes darted to the shadows, as if expecting them to lunge. I followed his gaze, and for a heartbeat the darkness seemed to shift, coiling like smoke. I hauled him up, slinging his arm over my shoulder. Then we stopped the digging. Whatever it is, we face it together. But as we staggered toward the stairs, the locket slipped from his fingers, clinking open on the floor. Inside, not a portrait, but a tiny brass gear, whirring faintly on its own, a heartbeat of metal that shouldn't move. Harlan burst into the attic just as the first toll of midnight echoed up. What in blazes? His words died as Elias slumped against me, whispering, It's starting again. The air grew heavy, the lantern flame stretching tall and unnatural. I snatched the locket shut, but the whirring didn't stop. It burrowed into my palm, warm as fevered skin, and in that moment I knew our plan had failed spectacularly. The shadow wasn't coming for Elias alone anymore. The lantern's flame guttered in the damp wind, casting jagged shadows across the cellar walls as I pried open the rusted lock on the family ledger. My fingers, slick with sweat despite the chill, trembled just enough to make the iron bar slip once. Elias had insisted we come here alone. No servants, no whispers to the household, because the truth, if it waited in these forgotten pages, would shatter us both. I glanced at him, my younger brother by 2 years, his face pale under the grime of our midnight trek from the main house. He nodded, eyes sharp with that cautious resolve he'd always carried, like a man measuring every step across thin ice. Read it quick, Thomas. Elias murmured, his voice low and edged with the drawl of our Georgia hills. "Dawn's not far, and if Pa finds us down here—" He didn't finish. We both knew the cost. Disinheritance, or worse, the unspoken fear that lingered in Father's gaze whenever midnight tolled. The ledger's cover creaked like old bones as I lifted it, pages yellowed and brittle, filled with the meticulous script of generations, names, dates, births, and vanishings. Every firstborn son gone at the stroke of 12, leaving only echoes in the estate's ledgers. My own name stared back at me from the most recent entry. Thomas Whitmore, born 1830. Eldest. Doomed, if the pattern held. I traced the lines with my thumb, heart pounding against my ribs. The entries weren't just records. They were pleas, frantic notes scrawled in margins. Heard the bell toll, then silence. No trace but the cradle empty. Grandfather's hand from 1805. Further back, great-uncle Josiah's account. The mirror in the study fogged over, and a shadow moved within, not his, but something older. Took him while we slept. A chill snaked down my spine, unrelated to the cellar's damp. We'd always dismissed it as fever dreams or runaway sons fleeing debts, but the pattern was ironclad, unbroken for 5 generations. And now, with Father ailing, the weight fell to me. Midnight approached again in 3 nights, my 25th birthday. If I didn't break this, the dynasty ended with dust. Elias leaned in, his breath steadying mine. "Look here, 1820, your Aunt Clara's note. She married in from the Low Country, brought a locket from her mother's side. Says the disappearances started after great-great-grandpa Whitmore wed Eliza Hargrove in 1775. Something about her dowry, a piece of land by the river." His finger jabbed at a faded map tucked between pages, inked lines marking a bend in the Oconee where our cotton fields met the wilds. Not just land, a grave, or worse, a pact. I'd heard whispers as a boy. Slaves murmuring of spirits bound to the soil, restless from the chains we'd forged. But Whitmore's didn't bend to ghosts. We tamed them, or so Father preached. We pored over it in silence, the lantern's light pooling like blood on the paper. Elias's wit surfaced in a grim half-smile. "Clever, ain't it? Build an empire on stolen earth, and the first sons pay the toll. Reckon Eliza's kin cursed us for it?" I shook my head, mind racing. No curses in ledgers, but facts. Every vanishing tied to that river plot. Bought cheap after a Hargrove massacre. Rumors of fever, but whispers of something darker. A ritual to appease old spirits displaced by our plows. My plan crystallized then. Reckless but clear. Unearth the truth at the source. Dig where the map pointed tonight before Father locked the grounds. As we slipped the ledger back and climbed the ladder, the house above creaked like it held its breath. Elias clapped my shoulder, brave as ever in his quiet way. "We face it together, brother." No running, but doubt gnawed at me. What if the shadow in the mirror came for us both? The first rooster crowed as we emerged into the pre-dawn fog, the river calling like a siren's promise. 3 nights. We'd need more than grit. We'd need to confront the bones buried there, and whatever hunger still waited. The lantern's flame guttered low in my hand, casting jagged shadows across the attic beams as I crept toward the trapdoor. Sweat stung my eyes, but I didn't dare wipe it away. Not with Elias's labored breathing echoing behind me like a bellows in the stifling heat. He'd insisted on coming, the stubborn fool, even after the fever had left him pale and shaking. "Can't let you face it alone, brother," he'd rasped, gripping my arm with hands that trembled but wouldn't let go. Now every creak of the floorboards under his boots felt like a thunderclap in the midnight hush of the Whitmore estate. I paused at the edge of the opening, peering down into the hallway below. Moonlight sliced through the cracked window panes, painting silver streaks on the faded wallpaper, but no movement stirred the dust motes. The clock in the parlor had just told 12, another midnight, another curse ticking closer. Father had vanished on one just like this 20 years back, and Uncle Josiah the year before that. Now it was my turn, the firstborn, the one doomed to slip away without a whisper. But tonight I wasn't going alone. Elias, my younger brother by 2 years, the cautious one who always plotted 3 steps ahead, had pieced together the fragments from Mother's hidden journals. "It's not ghosts," he'd said earlier, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "It's the land itself, the old well behind the barn, poisoned by something buried deep. We dug there at dusk, our shovels biting into the red Georgia clay until we hit it. A rusted iron box, etched with symbols that twisted my gut like a bad dream. Inside, a tarnished locket with a miniature portrait of great-grandfather Whitmore, his eyes staring out as if alive. And a note scrawled in faded ink. The debt calls at midnight. Firstborn pays or all fall. Elias had pocketed the locket, his jaw set. We end this tonight, he'd declared, and for once I believed him. My witty, quick-thinking brother always turning puzzles into plans. A floorboard groaned below, sharp and deliberate. My heart slammed against my ribs. I signaled Elias with a quick hand gesture, and he nodded, drawing the hunting knife from his belt. We weren't armed for war, just two brothers against whatever shadow had claimed our bloodline. But the weight of that knife felt like defiance in his grip. I eased the trapdoor up an inch, the hinges whispering like a secret. The hallway stretched empty, but the air hummed with something wrong. A chill that seeped through the summer warmth, carrying the faint rot of damp earth. "Thomas," Elias murmured, close enough that his breath warmed my ear. His voice held that edge of caution, the one that had saved us from childhood scrapes in the cotton fields. "You see it?" I shook my head, but my skin prickled as if watched. The locket burned in my pocket now, a hot coal against my thigh. We'd agreed. Confront the pull at the well, shatter the thing binding us. But as I lowered myself through the trapdoor, boots silent on the ladder rungs, doubt clawed at me. What if it wasn't the land? What if it was us? Our pride, our refusal to sell the estate and flee like Mother begged. We hit the hallway floor in tandem, shadows merging with the moon's glow. Elias took point, knife low and ready, while I clutched the lantern like a shield. The stairs loomed ahead, each step a gamble. Halfway down, a gust rattled the windows. No wind outside, just the house breathing. Elias froze, his free hand clamping my shoulder. "Hear that?" he whispered. Footsteps. Soft, padding from the parlor like bare feet on polished oak. Not ours. My pulse thundered, but I forced my voice steady. "Stay close. We go out the back." He nodded, eyes sharp in the dim light. But as we rounded the landing, the parlor door creaked open on its own, revealing not emptiness, but a figure. Tall, shrouded in mist that swirled from the floorboards. Father's coat, threadbare and unmistakable, hung on it like a specter. Elias lunged forward, knife flashing, but I yanked him back. "Wait, it's a trick." The mist thickened, coiling around our ankles like vines, pulling us toward the door. Elias slashed at it, the blade parting the fog with a hiss, but it reformed faster, tendrils snaking up his leg. "Thomas, the locket," he grunted, fighting the grip. I fumbled it out, the metal searing my palm. With a curse, I hurled it into the mist. A shriek tore the air, not human, but the wail of wind through cracked earth. The figure dissolved, the coat crumpling empty to the floor. Elias staggered free, but his face was ashen. It knew us. We bolted for the back door, the house groaning in protest, but the night outside waited. Dark, vast, and hungry. The well beckoned from the tree line, its stones glistening unnaturally. One more stand, brother against curse, and maybe we'd break the chain or join it. The lantern's flame guttered in the humid night air, casting jagged shadows across the attic beams as I clutched the brittle diary tighter. Elias's words blurred before my eyes. My great-grandfather, the first to vanish, scribbling frantic warnings about the midnight debt owed to the land itself. Below, the house creaked like a ship in a storm, and I could hear Father's labored breathing from the sick room. He was the latest firstborn, his time ticking down to that cursed hour, and I'd be damned if I let the pattern claim him too. I slammed the diary shut and bolted for the stairs, my boots thudding against the warped wood. The family portraits lining the hall seemed to leer, their painted eyes following my descent. Generations of Whitmores, each firstborn's face a hollow echo. Mother waited at the bottom, her hands wringing a lace handkerchief, the lines on her face deeper than the furrows in our cotton fields. "Elijah, the doctor's given up," she whispered, voice cracking like dry earth. "Says it's not fever, but something unnatural." "Not tonight," I growled, pushing past her toward the parlor where the old family Bible lay open on the table. I'd pieced it together from Elias's notes. The curse started in 1792, when Grandfather Whitmore struck a bargain with a traveling preacher to save the plantation from ruin. The preacher, some say a conjure man in disguise, demanded the soul of every firstborn son at midnight on the full moon after their 21st year. 6 gone already, swallowed by the Georgia night, their bodies never found. But Elias had hidden a counter-ritual, scratched in code at the diary's end. Father's cough rattled through the walls as I rifled the Bible's pages, my fingers smudged with ink and sweat. The clock on the mantel struck 11, its chimes a hammer blow. "Elijah!" Mother's cry pulled me up short. She stood in the doorway, pale as moonlight. pointing to the window where fog rolled in from the river like a living thing. Shapes moved in it, tall, indistinct figures whispering in tongues that twisted my gut. I grabbed the silver locket from my neck, the one Elias had passed down before he disappeared. Inside was a lock of hair from each lost son braided tight. The ritual demanded blood, mine as the next in line, and a confrontation at the old oak by the creek where the bargain was struck. No time for doubt. I snatched Father's revolver from the sideboard, loading it with trembling hands, and pulled Mother into a fierce hug. Stay with him. Bar the doors. If I don't come back by dawn, burn the house and the fields. End it. She nodded, tears carving tracks down her cheeks, but her grip on my arm was iron. You're braver than any of them, Elijah. Come back to us. The door banged shut behind me, and I plunged into the fog, the revolver heavy in my pocket, the locket burning against my chest. The path to the creek was overgrown, briars snagging my trousers like greedy fingers, but I pushed on, heart pounding in rhythm with the distant hoot of an owl. The oak loomed ahead, its gnarled branches clawing the sky, roots twisting into the earth like veins. Midnight was close. I could feel it in the thickening air, a pressure building behind my eyes. As I reached the trunk, the whispers grew louder, coalescing into voices, familiar, accusing. Join us, Elijah. The debt calls. Shadows peeled from the fog, resolving into translucent forms. My uncles, my grandfather, Elias himself, their eyes hollow pits. They circled, hands outstretched, the ground beneath my feet turning soft, sucking at my boots like quicksand. I drew the revolver, firing a shot into the nearest shadow, Elias's. It rippled but didn't fade, his voice echoing in my skull. Foolish boy. The land owns us. It fed your prosperity. Now it reaps. Sweat stung my eyes as I yanked the locket open, pricking my thumb on the clasp and letting blood drip onto the braided hair. The words from the diary spilled out in a rush. By blood given freely, break the chain that binds. Return what was taken or take the giver in turn. The shadows lunged, cold fingers brushing my skin, but I pressed the locket to the oak's bark, smearing the blood into the grooves. Pain lanced through me, sharp as a branding iron, and the tree shuddered, leaves rustling like 1,000 sighs. The figures howled, drawing back as cracks spiderwebbed up the trunk, glowing with an unearthly light. One by one they dissolved, sucked into the wood, Elias last, his form lingering with a nod of grim approval. Well done, kin. But the cost? The fog lifted abruptly, stars piercing the sky like judgment. I slumped against the oak, gasping, the revolver slipping from numb fingers. Dawn was still hours off, but the whispers were gone. Had I broken it? Or just delayed? Staggering back toward the house, I spotted a figure on the porch. Not Mother, but a stranger, cloaked and still, watching me with eyes that gleamed too bright. The preacher's kin, or something worse, come to collect what the ritual demanded next. My hand fumbled for the revolver, but the night held its breath, waiting. The lantern's flame flickered in my hand, casting jagged shadows across the Whitmore attic where dust motes danced like lost souls. I gripped the rusted key tighter, my knuckles white, as Elias's whisper cut through the midnight hush. Now, brother, before it claims you too. The air tasted of mildew and regret. Thick enough to choke on, but I twisted the key into the lock of the ancient chest anyway, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. What if this was the end of us all? Inside, the chest yawned open, revealing not gold or heirlooms, but a brittle journal bound in cracked leather, its pages yellowed by a century's secrets. I snatched it up, flipping through frantic scrawls that blurred under my trembling fingers. Entries from great-grandfather Elias Whitmore himself, dated 1776, confessing to a pact made in desperation during the Revolution. The firstborn's blood for the family's fortune, it read, sealed at midnight with the witch woman of the pines. She takes them to the shadows unless the debt is paid in kind. My stomach twisted. It wasn't a curse from nowhere, but a bargain we'd inherited, twisted into this nightmare. Every son vanishing at the stroke of 12, pulled into some unseen realm, their cries echoing only in family lore. And now it was my turn, the latest firstborn marked since birth. Elias leaned in, his cautious eyes narrowing behind wire-rimmed spectacles, the family scholar who'd pieced together fragments from old letters and grave whispers. See, it's no ghost story. We break it by facing it head-on. His voice was steady, but I caught the quiver in his hand as he traced the final page. Instructions for reversal, scrawled in haste a ritual of fire and blood, requiring the last of the line to confront the shadow gate in the family crypt below the plantation house. We'd come this far on grit alone, sneaking through cotton fields under moonless skies, dodging the overseers who'd dismiss us as mad, arguing in hushed tones over whether to burn the journal or trust its words. My witty cousin Lila, ever the spark, had scoffed at first, superstition's just rich folks' excuse for bad luck. But her quick mind had mapped the crypt's hidden passages from yellowed blueprints smuggled from the attic weeks ago. We descended the creaking stairs into the cool earth of the crypt, the air growing heavier with each step like wading through molasses. Torches sputtered to life in my hands, their glow revealing stone walls etched with names. My father, his father, all firstborns gone at midnight, their sarcophagi empty mocks of peace. Lila led the way, her brave stride unyielding despite the lantern's dim betrayal, whispering, "Keep moving, Thomas. We've got the salt and the sulfur. That's more than they ever did." I nodded, but doubt clawed at me. What if this ritual was just another lie, another way the family fortune fed on its own? Elias muttered calculations under his breath, timing the midnight toll from the distant church bell, his caution an anchor against my rising panic. The chamber at the crypt's heart was a forgotten hollow, roots twisting through cracks like veins of the earth itself. We formed the circle as the journal demanded, salt tracing a ring on the flagstones, sulfur powder dusted at the points, and at the center, a shallow basin for blood. My blood. Lila's knife hand was steady as she pricked my palm, crimson welling up to mix with the ash from burned family relics we'd gathered. Letters, locks of hair, symbols of the dynasty's weight. "For all of them," she said, her voice fierce, eyes locking with mine in a moment of raw camaraderie that steadied my shaking resolve. Elias struck the flint, igniting the mixture. Flames leaped up, unnatural blue, and the air hummed with a pressure that pressed against my eardrums. Midnight struck, the bell's echo reverberating through the stone like a judgment. The shadows in the corner coalesced, thickening into a doorway of writhing darkness, and from it came the pull, a spectral tug on my bones, whispering my name, Thomas Whitmore, firstborn, debtor's due. Faces flickered in the void, my father's stern gaze, grandfather's weary smile, all the lost sons reaching out. I staggered forward, the journal's words burning in my mind, confront and refuse. With a roar born of every denied dawn, I hurled the basin's contents into the gate, blood and fire mingling in a blaze that seared the air. "No more," I shouted, the words tearing from my throat. Elias and Lila flanked me, their hands on my shoulders lending strength as the shadows howled, lashing out with icy tendrils that scorched my skin. The gate buckled, the darkness fracturing like glass under a hammer, shards dissolving into harmless mist. A final wail echoed, then silence, profound, absolute. We collapsed against the walls, breaths ragged, the crypt's chill seeping into our bones. The pull was gone. I felt it in my marrow, the invisible chain snapped. But as dawn's first light filtered through a high grate, illuminating the scorched circle, Elias examined my blistered hands and murmured, "It's over. But the land, it'll bear the mark." Lila nodded, wiping soot from her face, her wit subdued. "Fortune's fortune, we'll rebuild without the blood price." We emerged into the Georgia morning, the plantation field stretching gold under the sun, but the great house loomed altered, its eaves shadowed longer than before. The dynasty endured, firstborn intact, yet whispers would linger in the pines, a reminder that some debts leave scars deeper than graves. I glanced back at the crypt door,